Welcome back to Whiteboard Wednesday. My name is Mike Cromwell.
I'm Brian Duvall.
A big part of the success is really qualifying and understanding the why behind what they're possibly considering outsourcing. Because in certain cases where it's crossing the bounds into things that are more strategic, the guidance to the client might be, that's really something that you shouldn't outsource, because if you do, whether it's Netrio or anybody else, they'll be set up to fail.
It's going to fail. That's right. Yeah, and so for SMBs, for example, this is where the biggest challenge comes in. Because an SMB, when you bring them into a managed IT, we'll just say engagement, their expectation is that there's a high level of involvement in strategic decisions for the organization. When I say strategic decisions for the organization, I'm thinking about things like, hey, what kind of laptops should I buy? These are SMB strategic decisions, right? What kind of laptops should I buy? Should I allow my end users to access their email on their phone? And what parameters do I put behind that? How do I protect specific assets within my organization? So obviously I have an antivirus product, and usually I'm just going to take whatever the MSP has shoved down my throat, but do I understand what that product's doing? Do I understand what the capabilities of that product are? And is that adequate for me as an organization? Those types of things are strategic, whether you realize they are or not. And the expectation for the SMB is that the managed IT service provider is doing those things, but in many cases, they're not. They're just applying generic technologies to, generic desktops or laptops or whatever's in the field. They're not giving it a second thought about whether or not that's a good business decision for the customer. So if you don't have a virtual CIO type resource, or if your MSP doesn't offer that as an extension of their service and really offer it, I don't mean like put it as a bullet point, on the list of products and benefits and say virtual CIO. That virtual CIO means you're sitting down with that person on a regular basis. You're meeting, you're talking about strategic direction for the organization. Things like budgets are coming up. You're talking about long-term goals. You're talking about growth of the company. Right? It's not just an IT discussion.
It's really a fractional CIO, somebody that's going to be a stakeholder in the business on a part-time basis, and somebody's going to be involved in all those strategic decisions. And by the way, have a certain degree of authority within the organization to affect change.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, you captured it perfectly. They need to have some stake in the success of the business overall and how successful the engagement with the MSP was. And that's why I think I get into these conversations about, when organizations decide to outsource. What are the driving factors behind outsourcing, right? And for me, it has to be very strategic to your organization. You're trying to satisfy things like, I don't want to bring on technical staff and try to manage them. I don't want to deal with recruiting in today's economy because it's very difficult to compete, from a salary perspective. I don't want to have to staff to get the type of coverage that I need. I need 24/7 coverage, but I can't hire 12 people. I don't have the budget for it, right? So all those things are strategic items that help an organization make a selection to outsource something. And that's where it starts to make sense, right? Because then you're starting to meet your strategic objectives as a result of your selection to outsource your IT. That's where business and IT start to align. And those types of things need to happen in an MSP engagement or a managed IT services engagement so that you understand the why behind what you're doing.
And done right, when in the sales process and from the customer's perspective, it's the qualification process and kind of defining requirements. Where ideally does that conversation take place?
It's got to be at the very beginning.
Yeah, I agree.
If it's not part of the very first conversations that you're having about, how am I going to deal with IT in my business, then it's hard, I think, to backtrack and have that conversation later because you've missed opportunities to define, what your strategic goal is. And I'm on calls with potential customers all the time where they say, oh yeah, well, we're looking for an MSP and we've got, 50 servers and 250 desktops. Can you give us a price, please? And really, it's like, okay, let's pump the brakes for a second and let's talk about why you're making this decision. How are you handling it today? Is that working well for you? What gaps do you have in your organization that aren't being filled today? Are you having conversations about business continuity? Are you having conversations about your cloud-based strategy? Do you consume most of your software through SaaS? And is that a goal and objective that you want to continue to try to push? all my applications in the cloud, or ground to cloud migration strategies for on-prem equipment or infrastructure. And so if you're not having those conversations in the very beginning, you don't really understand what that client's trying to accomplish anyway.